Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you are watching from anywhere in the world. It's a real pleasure to be with you. My name is Ivan Haigh. I'm an associate professor at the University of Southampton, and I'm absolutely thrilled today to be joining you from my very small little office at home, where I've been working for the last 12 weeks under these very difficult COVID circumstances. But it's a real pleasure to be with you. It's a real pleasure to speak and give this seminar on behalf of God's House Tower in Southampton. I've always, since coming to Southampton as a student in 1998, I've always been fascinated by the old Southampton city walls and walking along them. And it's just been a real pleasure living in Southampton now for almost 20 years to see the walls develop. And I've always loved walking by God's House Tower. I've never actually been in the building, and I'm super excited when this is all over to come down and see it and see all the magnificent things you are doing. Okay, so today I'm going to speak for, I think, something in the order of around half an hour. My title of my talk is Rising Tides, Sustainability Across Our Blue Planet. And what I want to do is I want to tell you 7 reasons why the ocean is so wonderful. We're coming up to the decade of the ocean. We've just had the Day of the Ocean. I love the ocean. I've been fascinated by it since a kid. But I wanted to speak about 7 reasons why the ocean is so wonderful, 7 pressures that the oceans are facing, and then I'm going to pick one of those pressures that I specialise in, sort of sea level rise and climate change, and talk about that in more detail. And then very briefly at the end, I want to just talk about 7 things that we can do to just ease some of those pressures on the ocean and keep it sustainable for the next generation. So this is our fantastic planet. This is planet Earth. I don't know why we call it planet Earth, because actually Earth only makes up 30% of the surface of our planet. And I've chosen this Google image in Google Earth especially because if you were to rotate this exactly 180 degrees, actually this is what you'd see. You see a little slither of New Zealand there and some islands, but other than that you almost entirely see ocean. And I think our planet actually should be called Ocean, not Earth. And just a few quick facts for you. The ocean covers 71% of the Earth's surface, but it contains almost 99% of the living space, if you kind of imagine that sort of 3D ocean for fish and sharks and whales and plant life, etc. The average depth of the ocean is about 3.8 kilometres, 3,800 metres, but it goes down as far as 11 kilometres in Mariana Trench, which is actually deeper than Everest is high. So it's quite staggering. Now, let's just quickly go through 7 reasons why the ocean is so wonderful. Well, the first reason why the ocean is so wonderful is, hardly anyone knows this, but it actually helps us to breathe. When we think of one of the most biodiverse hotspots on the Earth, we tend to think of the Amazon and the Amazon jungle. And the Amazon gives us a huge amount of oxygen, but actually more than 80% of the oxygen each of us breathes actually comes from the ocean, and it comes from phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are tiny microscopic organisms that live in the sea, and these produce oxygen. They take in carbon dioxide, produce oxygen. So this is what these creatures look like. They're very, very diverse, but kind of tiny little cell-like creatures. But they're one of the reasons why we have a habitable planet, and we have, as humans, we breathe in a lot of the oxygen that they emit into the atmosphere. The second reason why the ocean is so fantastic for us is it's a major source of food. And I know many of you all around the world love seafood, love fish. It's been estimated that the ocean is the #1 source of protein for more than 1 billion people, but probably even expands beyond that. And it's staggering to just think of the kind of incredible wealth of food. Here's just some incredible school of fish that the ocean has, and again later on we'll hint at some of the pressures that those fish stocks are facing. The third reason I want to go in is it's the world's largest ecosystem. Increasingly we're recognising the importance of ecosystems. So it's easy to take a bit of marsh and think, well, what's that there for? Let's destroy it, let's put it in a port. But we're more and more we're realising that ecosystems are, from the tiniest creatures down to the kind of birds and large creatures in sport, are so incredibly important. And something like 94% of the Earth's living species exist within the oceans, within ocean ecosystems. There's hundreds of different types of ecosystems, but one of my favourite here is kelp forests. And these just support an incredible diverse. So the plants offer shelter for the really tiny fish, and the big fish come in and eat those, and the sharks come in and eat those, and birds come down, and just incredible rich ecosystems, from mangroves to salt marshes to hydrothermal vents. There's so much going on in the ocean. They regulate diseases, they provide us with food, but they suck in carbon dioxide. There's so many different things that these offer. So the ocean helps us to breathe. It's a valuable source of food, really important ecosystem, but it also creates millions of jobs. I read one fact that something like 60 million people in the world were engaged in fisheries and agriculture. More than 90% of the world's trade is by ships. But I would say probably well over 1 billion people in some way, their livelihoods depend on the ocean, particularly in some of the poorer parts of the world. So the ocean is incredible. It's certainly created, it certainly is the way I get my money from lecturing about the ocean. And here's just some amazing pictures in the South China Sea of agricultural sites. The ocean regulates our climate. We tend to think of weather, but the ocean is actually a really important source of weather. It soaks up heat. It transports warm water from the equator to poles. It's one of the key ways in which heat gets from the warmer equator to the poles. Here's just a picture of some ocean currents. Up the top there you can see the Gulf Stream, and the Gulf Stream is one of the reasons why the UK is so much warmer than it is. We should have a climate that's very similar to Canada, but we are actually much warmer. Northern Europe is much warmer because of that warm water sort of regulates climate. And these ocean currents play an incredibly important part in the climate. And here's just a zoomed in picture of the Gulf Stream. You can see the beautiful eddies carrying warm water and sort of spinning off there. The ocean keeps us healthy in so many different ways. It's a valuable source of medicines. We have people in our department working on corals, and they're finding all the time corals have medicinal properties. Particularly in the time of COVID, we recognise the importance of green spaces, but the oceans provide these fantastic blue spaces. We love walking along the ocean. We love exercising the ocean. I love surfing. We can windsurf. We can sail, and it's been shown in so many studies that reduces stress, improves our mood. And actually, one of the first things when lockdown lifted slightly in COVID is, our family said, well, let's go down to, let's go for a walk in the sea, breathe in some fresh air. These are just an example of these phytofluorescent corals that do have medicinal properties. And I think related to the last point, the ocean makes us happy. It certainly makes me happy. We love walking by it, we love the fresh air, we love to swim in it, we love to snorkel, sail. Many of us even fall in love by the sea. Now, I want to apologise for this very, very grainy photo, but this is me aged, I think I must have been aged about 20. This is my beautiful wife Fiona, but we met on the Isle of Wight on the beach, and this was taken actually around the time we met, and we fell in love on a beach, so we owe a lot to the ocean. So those are 7 reasons why the ocean is so wonderful. Now I want to come on to sustainability, and sustainability is probably one of those words where we all think it's relatively easy to know what sustainability is, but defining it is a bit more difficult. And I really like the Brundtland's Commission report. They define it this way: sustainability is meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is my beautiful wife and my beautiful daughter, Ren. She's a bit older than in this first photo, at least. But when I had her, I realised how much I love the oceans. I want her to live in a world where the oceans are healthy and beautiful, and her children and their children to live in a world where we have this beautiful ocean. So the ocean provides us with wonderful things. How do we utilise that? How do we use the ocean for food, but at the same time ensuring that we're not compromising future generations to enjoy this? Okay, so what I want to move on to now is these stresses. Now, it'd be amazing to think that the ocean was a stress-free zone, but it's not. It's a zone of incredible stresses. Increasingly, we've woken up to the fact that plastics and just rubbish in general are putting a huge stress on our oceans, and I'm particularly thankful to David Attenborough and the Blue Planet for highlighting that and for people starting to take this much more seriously. I knew a PhD student in Australia, and she was one of the first people to start working on plastics. And even in the Southern Ocean, one of the most remotest of the oceans in the world, she led a cruise there where, they were finding a little bit of microplastics in every square metre of water, even though it's an incredibly remote part of the ocean. Overfishing is a major issue. Thankfully, a lot of regulation has gone in, but there's still parts of the world where fishing isn't regulated, particularly in developing countries, and that's putting a huge burden. Fish stocks are running out, and people are starving as a result. Another major stress that the ocean is facing is untreated wastewater. I love the fact I have a bath, I love the fact I have a sink, I love the fact that I don't have to go and collect water from a well. But where does that water go after we've used it? Well, luckily here in most of the UK, that goes into processing plants that clean it before putting it back into the ocean. But in many countries of the world, that wastewater goes straight into the ocean, and it can cause a lot of problems. In the Thames estuary, for example, in the UK, had notoriously bad water qualities in the past as a result of this thing. But sadly, this is still going on. The oceans are also subject now to a lot of nutrient pollution. Our agriculture now is on a colossally large scale. We pump that land full of fertilizers, and that's fantastic. It grows us amazing food, but often that nutrients in those fertilizers run off into rivers, that runs off into the ocean, and that can cause a serious problem. For example, it can change coral communities from being sort of hard to soft, and it can have a real impact on creatures and plants in the ocean. This is still a very key problem today. I mentioned how many incredible ecosystems there are in the ocean and all of the fish and birds and sharks and whales they support. Well, we are seeing in many parts of the world destruction of these habitats, either for overfishing, dynamiting of corals, for example, or just simply building on the coast, massive growth in coastal populations, building of ports. Here in the UK, we've seen a lot of destruction of salt marshes, which provide very, very valuable services. The sixth thing, I don't need to go into a lot of detail, but obviously the ocean's been impacted on many occasions very negative ways through sort of oil destructions. For example, here you can see the Deepwater Horizon in the Gulf of Mexico. As is climate change. Climate change affects our planet in so many ways, but one of the scariest is we could live in a world where there's no corals. Here's a picture of coral bleaching. And previously, we could have bleaching under normal circumstances, but it tended to last a little while. But now we're seeing prolonged bleaching, and it's destroying large parts of the Great Barrier Reef and other important corals around the world. Okay, so what I want to do for the next 10 minutes is just really look at this aspect of climate change, particularly sea level rise, which is what I specialise in. Now let's just assume for a time being, I'm sure most of you know what climate change is, but let me just remind you in a very sort of simple, let's call it Climate 101. So the sun rays come through our atmosphere and heat up the Earth. Now most of that radiation is absorbed, but some of it is reflected back from the Earth's surface or from the atmosphere. It's reflected back into the atmosphere. Now, normally at night, the energy that's being warmed turns into infrared radiation and it's emitted from the Earth's surface. Now, some of that reflects into space, but some of it is reflected back into the Earth's surface by the greenhouse gases, particularly CO2. Now, we've been doing probably the biggest experiments that's ever been done. We've been cutting down trees, we've been concreting, we've been burning fossil fuels, and we've increased the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. This is one of the most famous data sets in the world, and it's called the Keeling Curve by Professor Keeling here. And he has been measuring carbon dioxide in Hawaii since the late 1950s. And you can see that we've gone from about 315 parts per million to well over 410. It's even higher than that this year, coming up to 420. So essentially what we've done is we've increased the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, and now less energy is being lost to space and more is being reflected back into the Earth's surface. And as a result, the Earth is warming. Now, here what I've done is taken different estimates of global temperature from measurements from different groups around the world. And these are offset to the sort of average between 1981 and 2010. That's kind of zero. But what you can see is that we've now passed about 1 degree warming compared to the pre-industrial. So we've come from temperatures down here, and you can see that since the 1970s it's rapidly increased. Now it doesn't matter which climate data set you take in the world, whether it's a Hadley data set from the UK Met Office, whether it's NOAA from the US, whether it's NASA, other groups around the world, you can see that our temperature is undeniably, our global temperature has increased by now more than 1 degree. Now I love this image. This is by Professor Ed Hawkins from Reading University, fantastic guy. And he put together these warming stripes, and each of these stripes represents a temperature from around 1850 on the left in the blue to present day. So you can see we had one particularly warm period in the middle here, which corresponds with around the 1940s. But you can see that our climate has warmed up dramatically. Now these are the top 10 warmest years, and you can see that in the last 20 years we've had 10 of the warmest years, and in fact now 2019 has surpassed this. The 10 warmest years have occurred in the 10 last years, which is actually remarkably scary. Now, what are the impacts of that? Well, probably it's most clearly seen in the melting of glaciers. This is Oak Glacier in Iceland. This is what it looked like 40 years ago. This is what it looks like today. Now, they actually had a funeral here, and many important people came to the site, and they left this plaque. And I think it's incredible. It says, Oak is the first Icelandic glacier to lose its status as a glacier. In the next 200 years, all glaciers are expected to follow the same path. This monument is to acknowledge that we know what's happening, we know what needs to be done, only you didn't. I love the fact it says August 2019 or 450 parts per million, so quite sobering effect there. Well, climate change has many different impacts as this warming up. It's changing the rain and snowfall patterns, it's leading to some stronger storms, it's leading to higher temperatures, more heat waves. We're seeing that particularly in Europe. Changes in animal migration, more droughts and wildfire. We tend to got so obsessed with COVID, we tend to forget that Australia, just incredible periods of wildfires earlier this year, Less snow and ice melt, as already said, thawing permafrost. We're getting warmer oceans, damaging corals, and rising sea levels, and that's what I want to focus on now. Now, this global warming is leading to two things. First of all, it's melting glaciers, as I already hinted at here, but it's also melting land-based ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica, and that water is now making its way into the ocean. Not only that, but as the ocean warms up, it also expands. And these three factors are leading to, have led to an undeniable increase in sea level rise. That we can definitely see the rate of that is accelerating. We have very, very high confidence from paleo sea level records, but also from long tide gauge records. Here are three of the longest tide gauge records in the world from San Francisco, Brest, for example, in the blue and black. You can see that sea levels go up and down each year, but overall we've seen this definite increase in sea level rise from 200 years ago, 1800 on the left, to 2020 today. We can see that sea levels are rising. They've risen by about 20 centimetres. We can see from satellite data that rate of rise has increased. So the 20th century, the rate of rise was about 1.7, 1.8 millimetres per year. Now it's more than double that, 3.3 millimetres per year. The rate of rise isn't uniform. You can see in some areas, red is rising at 10 millimetres per year. Other areas, it's not rising very much at all. But on average, that yellow colour, we're seeing about 3.5 millimetres per year of rise. Now, what do we predict for the future? Well, the United Kingdom Climate Impacts Programme, which was released in 2008, is our latest projections. But under different research concentration pathways, these are kind of projections of what the future might look like. We can see that sea levels are going to continue to rise and accelerate anywhere from around 20 centimetres to 1 metre. And this just shows the projections for London. So you can see that we're expecting, up to 1 metre of sea level rise. We don't know where exactly it's going to be. It's still some uncertainty, but 1 metre of sea level rise is possible. Now, the Paris Agreement was a fantastic thing. In the Paris Agreement, all of the countries that were there signed this. They said we're going to hold the increase in global average temperatures to well below 2 degrees above pre-industrial, and to pursue efforts to limit temperatures to 1.5 degrees, recognising that this will significantly reduce the risks and impacts of climate change. Now, small island developing states played a big role in that, even though the report didn't actually mention sea level rise, but that was one of the key drivers. Now, interestingly, if we can follow the Paris Agreement, it will be fantastic. It will reduce a lot of the negative impacts of climate change, but sea level rise is different. We're already committed to sea level rise. We've only warmed the surface of the ocean. That heat will take hundreds of years to transfer in the deep ocean. We started melting of glaciers. Even if we were to cut emissions now, sea levels are going to continue to rise for hundreds of years. We did a little study looking at this. With 1.5 degrees of warming, even if temperatures come right back down to 1.5 degrees, we're going to still see at least 1 metre of sea level rise by 2300. However, if we carry on as emitting as normal under an RCP 8.5 scenario, then we could see up to about 5 metres sea level rise by 2300. So you can see that sea levels are always going to continue to rise. It's just a matter of whether that rise is 5 metres or 1 metre. So what we do today is crucial. Now, what I want to do is look at 3 different areas. I want to look at small islands, I want to look at deltas, and I want to look at coastal cities. And these are the 3 things that are going to feel this effect of sea level rise the first. There are 58 small island developing states, 28 in the Caribbean, 4 in the Atlantic Ocean, 1 in the Arabian Sea, 4 in the Indian Ocean, and a large 20 in the Pacific, 1 in the South China Seas. Now, each of these island nations is very different, but they share a number of things in common. They're relatively small, they're remote, they have high energy costs, they have a heavy dependence on trade, they have a disproportionately expensive infrastructure administration, and importantly, they have very fragile physical, biological, chemical environments that are susceptible to not only natural disasters, but obviously longer term climate change. And what's climate change doing? This is the capital of the Maldives. We tend to think of SIDS looking like this, beautiful islands, but this is actually what the capital of the Maldives looks like, one of the most densely populated places on Earth. And climate change is increasing storminess, wind, rainfall, sea temperatures going up, which are affecting the corals. We're getting destruction of mangroves, bigger waves, bigger storm surges, bigger mean sea. These put massive pressures on islands like this. Now, we've been studying here in Southampton this island of Wilandi. This is in the Solomon Islands. This is quite an interesting island. It was a sandbank, but it's been built up by the population there. It had a population of about 300 people in the 60s, but that grew to well over 1,000. But in 2009, that island was completely washed away by a storm. This was the island a few years ago with just one house remaining. That island has now gone, it's underwater, and one of our PhD students is spending quite a bit of time studying that scenario. But you can see how a combination of sea level rise with a few big storms can completely destroy its habitat, and people are starting to move away from some of these smaller islands to the mainland. The other areas that's really affected by sea level rise is deltas. Here are some of the biggest river deltas in the world. Big rivers bring lots of sediment towards the coast. They create these incredibly rich, fertile, low-lying lands. We've been studying the Mekong Delta in Vietnam. This has a population of about 20 million, many of them lying in incredibly low-lying areas, very close to mean sea level. You get flooding from the Mekong River, but you also get flooding from the ocean. So, for example, Typhoon Linda killed more than 4,000 people in 1987, destroyed close to 300,000 homes, flooded large areas of rice paddy. And you can see as sea levels rise, these become incredibly susceptible to sea level rise and climate change. And those are just one of the impacts. There's many more things going on these deltas. The other thing that are really going to be impacted by sea level rise is coastal cities. Something like 140 approximately cities around the world with populations greater than 1 million on the coast, including London here in the UK. And cities are going to be very, very susceptible to sea level rise. London is very lucky, it's protected by the Thames Barrier, but the Thames Barrier has been closed more than 193 times, and as sea levels rise, the barrier is going to be closed more and more to the point that we will need a new barrier. But many cities don't have barriers. Many cities are going to have huge problems in the future. So you can see that the ocean is wonderful, but there are these pressures, and particularly climate change is a key one. So I just want to end briefly. Well, what can we do about it? What can we do to ease the pressures on the ocean, and particularly ease the pressures with climate change? This is just an article from the BBC that suggested 7 things that I think are quite useful. So the first thing we can do is change the way we eat, change our diet. For example, we could live more seasonally, which would certainly help to combat climate change. We could halve the amount of food waste. I'm always a bit ashamed sometimes with what goes off in our fridge and what we throw away, and cutting our food waste could have quite a significant effect on climate change. We could cut down on red meat. Now this is a hard one for me because I do love meat, but that can have a significant effect. In fact, as it says here, going vegan can be better for the planet than flying less or even buying an electric car. We can cycle more, and this is one of the key things I've been. So for the last 10 years I've cycled to work pretty much every day. And it's been fantastic to just cut down the use of our cars. Cheaper for me, less petrol, but better for the environment as well. We could video conference more. I travel quite a lot with work, but actually COVID has really woken me up to the fact that actually I can't video conference. In fact, I was in a video conference where we were supposed to be in Berlin, but the conference ran very, very well. So I'm hoping more and more that COVID has woken us to the fact that we don't have to travel so much. We can use a washing line instead of a tumble dryer. That's a bit harder in the UK where the weather's not so good. And we can insulate our homes. These are just 7 of the things we could do, all of us personally, in addition to things like writing to our MPs to take climate change seriously and reduce the pressure on our oceans. So the oceans are under these incredible stresses. Climate change being a really dominant one. But I don't want to end on a negative note. Who are these boys? Hopefully some of you will recognise them. They are the Thailand football team, the ball team that got stuck in that cave. Now, these pressures that are facing the ocean seem insurmountable. And these boys were stuck in a cave. I've done quite a bit of caving when I was a bit younger. I haven't done cave diving, but I've known friends cave diving. Everyone said there was no possible way these boys could be rescued. That cave was dangerous to incredible professionals, let alone these boys. And thought there would be no way these boys would rescue. But people came from all over the world, lending their skills, from armies to divers to volunteers cooking. And when all of these nations put their minds together, they did perform this incredible rescue. I think we have all of the know-how to reduce climate change. I think we have all of the know-how to live and have a sustainable ocean, but we need to come together as a people and work together to tackle this big challenge. So it's been a real pleasure to spend half an hour with you. Thank you to God's House for inviting me. I can't wait to come down and see the refurbished building when it's opened. I hope you all have a good day, and please contact me if you have any questions. There's not many Ivan Haighs in the world, so if you just Google my name, my website will come up, and please send me an email and ask me any questions. Thank you very much.